I sat at my parents' dining table for Sunday dinner when my younger sister Carly announced, "Mom and Dad promised I could move in with you next month." The room went silent. Everyone expected me to smile and agree like I always did. Instead, I calmly sipped my water and said, "That's awkward. I sold the house last Friday to a couple. My mother's fork clatters." My father's face turns red. Carly's mouth drops open. The dinner that was supposed to celebrate family has just become a battlefield. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. My mother, Patricia, stared at me like I'd just announced I was moving to Mars. My father, Douglas, set down his glass of wine with such force I thought it might shatter. Carly's perfectly made-up face twisted into an expression I couldn't quite read. Confusion? Anger? Disbelief? "You what?" my mother finally managed, her voice climbing an octave higher than normal. I repeated myself, slower this time, enunciating each word. "I sold the house last Friday. The closing went through without any issues. The new owners take possession in 10 days. My father's face had gone from red to purple. "Bernardine, this is unacceptable. You can't just make decisions like this without consulting the family." The family. That word had always meant something different to them than it did to me. To them, family meant I was supposed to be available, compliant, and ready to solve everyone's problems with my time, money, and resources. To me, family was supposed to mean love, respect, and mutual support. We'd clearly been operating with different definitions for years. Let me back up and give you some context. I bought that house 5 years ago when I was 27 years old. I'd worked my way through nursing school, pulling double shifts at a diner while maintaining a full-course load. After graduation, I landed a job as a pediatric nurse at County General Hospital. The pay was decent, but I wanted more stability, so I picked up weekend shifts at an urgent care clinic across town. For 3 years, I barely slept. I saved every penny I could. When my grandmother Dorothy passed away, she left me $30,000. My mother was furious about that, but Grandma Dorothy had been clear in her will. The money was for me, specifically for a house. Combined with my savings, I had enough for a down payment on a modest 3-bedroom bungalow in a quiet neighborhood in suburban Columbus, Ohio. It had a small backyard, hardwood floors that needed refinishing, and a kitchen that was stuck somewhere in 1985. But it was mine. I spent months renovating it myself. I learned how to tile a backsplash from YouTube videos. I painted every room. I planted tomatoes and herbs in the backyard. That house was my sanctuary, my proof that hard work and determination could build something real and solid. My parents never contributed a single dollar to any of it. Not the down payment, not the mortgage, not the new roof I had to put on last year when the old one started leaking. But somehow, in their minds, it had become the family house. They'd started referring to it that way about 2 years ago. At first, I thought it was just a turn of phrase. Now I realized it was something much more calculated. "We already told Carly she could have the guest room," my mother said, her voice taking on that wheedling tone that always made my stomach knot. "She needs help getting on her feet." Carly was 30 years old. She'd been getting on her feet for the past decade. "I mentioned at Easter that I was considering downsizing," I said calmly, cutting into my now cold pot roast. "I told you I wanted something closer to the hospital. A condo, maybe. Less maintenance." "You said considering," my father interjected. "You didn't say you were actually going to do it, and certainly not without discussing it with us first. The house was in my name. Only my name. I don't need permission to sell my own property." Carly had been uncharacteristically quiet during this exchange, but now she reached into her designer purse, the one I knew cost at least $400 because I'd seen it at the mall. She pulled out a key and slammed it on the table. "Then what's this?" she demanded, her voice shaking with rage. I stared at the key. It looked exactly like my house key. Because it was my house key, or rather, a copy of it. "Where did you get that?" I asked. my voice much calmer than I felt. My mother had the decency to look slightly uncomfortable. We had a spare maid last Christmas. You remember, dear. You left your purse in the hall when you went to help with the dishes. We just thought it would be good to have a spare. For emergencies. Christmas. 8 months ago. I remembered that day. I'd brought homemade cookies and expensive wine. I'd done the dishes while they relaxed. And while I was being helpful, they'd gone through my purse, taken my keys, and had copies made without my knowledge or permission. We gave it to Carly 2 weeks ago, my father added, as if this was perfectly reasonable. She needed to take measurements of her new room. She's been planning the furniture layout. The room started to spin a little. Carly's been in my house? Without my permission? Carly at least had the grace to look slightly sheepish, but mostly she just looked defiant. It's going to be my room. I needed to know if my bed would fit. How many times? I asked. Does it matter? Carly shot back. How? Many times. She shrugged. I don't know. 5, 6. I went over on my lunch breaks mostly. The neighborhood's really quiet during the day. I felt violated, invaded. My sanctuary, the place I'd built with my own hands and money, had been infiltrated. She'd been walking through my home, measuring rooms, planning her takeover, all while I was at work saving lives and completely unaware. You need to fix this, my mother said, her tone shifting from wheedling to demanding. Call those people. Tell them the sale is off. There must be some kind of cooling off period. There isn't. And I wouldn't use it if there were. The contracts are signed. The money has been transferred. This is done. I pushed back from the table and stood up. My pot roast sat congealing on my plate, but I'd lost my appetite somewhere around the revelation that my family had been systematically violating my privacy and boundaries for months. Where do you think you're going? My father asked, moving toward the doorway between the dining room and the hall. We're not finished discussing this. Yes, we are. There's nothing to discuss. I sold my house. End of story. Bernardine Rose Callahan, my mother said, pulling out my full name like I was 10 years old again. You sit back down this instant. Family doesn't treat family this way. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw something I'd been too naive or too hopeful to see before. She didn't see me as a daughter. She saw me as a resource, a bank account with legs, a problem solver who was supposed to make her life easier without expecting anything in return. You're right, I said quietly. Family doesn't treat family this way. Family doesn't steal keys. Family doesn't make promises using someone else's property. Family doesn't invade someone's home without permission. I grabbed my purse from the hall table where I'd left it, painfully aware now that they'd probably gone through it multiple times over the years. How many times had my keys been copied? My credit cards photographed? My personal information rifled through? My father moved to block the front door. He was a big man, over 6 feet tall and heavy-set. When I was little, I thought he was invincible. Now I just saw him as an obstacle. Move, I said. Not until you agree to make this right. Dad, I'm leaving. You can move, or I can call the police and tell them you're holding me against my will. Something in my voice must have convinced him I was serious. He stepped aside, but not before my mother got in one last shot. You've always been selfish, Bernardine. Ever since you got that nursing degree, you've thought you're better than us. Well, you're not. You're just a spoiled, ungrateful girl who doesn't understand what family means. I could have said a lot of things in that moment. I could have listed every time I'd helped them financially, every holiday I'd hosted, every problem I'd solved. Instead, I just walked out the door and climbed into my sensible Honda Civic, my hands shaking so hard I could barely get the key in the ignition. I sat in their driveway for 5 full minutes, trying to steady my breathing. Finally, I pulled out my phone and called the one person I knew would understand. Morgan, it's me. You were right, about all of it. Morgan met me at a coffee shop 20 minutes later. She was still in her scrubs from her shift at the emergency room, her dark hair pulled back in a messy bun. We'd been friends since nursing school, and she'd been telling me for years that my family took advantage of me. I'd always defended them. Family is complicated, I'd say. They mean well. They just don't understand boundaries. "Tell me everything," she said, sliding a large caramel latte across the table to me. I did. The whole story spilled out. The announcement at dinner, the key, Carly's multiple unauthorized visits to my house, my parents' expectation that I'd just cancel a legal sale of my property to accommodate their plans. "They've been planning this for 6 months," I said, stirring my coffee without drinking it. That's what my dad said. 6 months. And I had no idea. "What else did they say?" Morgan asked, her nurse instincts kicking in. She could always tell when I was holding something back. I took a deep breath. They didn't just promise Carly the guest room. They promised her the entire house. Morgan's eyes widened. What? The plan was for Carly to take over the house. They expected me to find somewhere smaller and cheaper to rent. They saw my house as a resource for the whole family, not as my personal property that I worked my ass off to buy. That's insane. It gets worse. I pulled out my phone and opened my text messages. I'd been getting them all evening. Carly quit her job 3 weeks ago. No. Yes. She broke her lease, paid the penalty fee. She threw away or donated most of her furniture. She has 7 boxes of stuff in her car right now. She was planning to move in the day after tomorrow. She assumed I'd just accept it once it was already done. Morgan leaned back in her chair, shaking her head. That's next-level manipulation. My mom said I've always been the responsible one and Carly needs help. My dad said family takes care of family. I finally took a sip of my latte. It was too sweet, but the warmth felt good. Then they started listing all the other times they've made promises using my things. Like what? Remember my car? The one I bought used when I was 23? Apparently, they told Carly she could borrow it whenever she wanted. I didn't know that until she got mad at me last year for saying no when she wanted it for a weekend trip. You're kidding. I'm not. And remember that timeshare week at the cabin in Tennessee that Grandma Dorothy left me? The one you almost never get to use because you work so much? That one. They've been sending Carly and her friends there for years, without asking me, without telling me. Morgan reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Bernie, this is financial abuse. You know that, right? This is a pattern of exploiting you. There's more. I pulled up my credit card statement on my phone. Last year, I noticed some charges I didn't recognize. I called the company to dispute them. Turns out, my parents gave Carly my credit card number for emergencies. Please tell me you got that resolved. I did, but only after Carly had racked up about $2,000 in charges. Clothes, restaurants, concert tickets. I got most of it credited back, but not all of it. And when I confronted my parents, they said I was being petty. It was just money, and family helps family. Morgan looked furious. When does it end? When do you get to say enough? That's just it. I think I finally did. By selling the house before they could stop me. My phone buzzed. A text from my father. Come back. We need to talk about this like adults. I showed Morgan. She snorted. Adults. Right. Because adults definitely steal keys and break into houses. Another text. This time from my mother. Carly is devastated. How could you do this to your sister? Then Carly herself. I hope you're happy. You've ruined my life. Block them, Morgan said. At least for tonight. You need space to think. But before I could, my phone rang. My father. Against my better judgment, I answered. Bernardine, get back here, now. No, we're not done talking about this. Yes, we are. Listen to me very carefully. His voice dropped to that tone he used when he was about to deliver an ultimatum. You can't sell that house without our permission. My blood ran cold. Excuse me? 2 years ago, remember when you had your appendectomy? When you were recovering from surgery? I did remember. I'd been in significant pain, on heavy medication. My parents had visited me at home a few days after I was released from the hospital. They'd brought soup and magazines. I'd thought it was sweet. We had you sign some papers, he continued, for estate planning purposes. You were added to our will, and we were added as co-owners of your house. It was supposed to simplify things if something happened to any of us. The coffee shop suddenly felt too hot. What? So, you see, you can't just sell the house without discussing it with us. We're co-owners. That's impossible. I just sold the house. My attorney verified clear title. My name was the only one on the deed. There was a pause. Then, maybe the paperwork never got properly filed, but we have copies of the documents with your signature on them. Did I actually sign those papers, Dad? Or were you taking advantage of me when I was drugged on pain medication? Another pause. Longer this time. We'll discuss this tomorrow. Come by the house at 10 in the morning. He hung up. I stared at my phone, my heart hammering. Morgan was watching me carefully. What did he say? I told her. Her expression shifted from concern to alarm. Bernie, that's fraud. If they forged your signature or got you to sign something when you were incapacitated, that's illegal. And if they tried to use those documents to take out loans against your house, they wouldn't do that, I said. But even as the words came out, I wasn't sure I believed them. Morgan pulled out her own phone. What's your attorney's name? The one who handled the sale? Helen Rutherford. But it's Sunday night. She won't be available until tomorrow. Then first thing tomorrow morning, you call her. You tell her everything. And Bernie? Morgan's voice was gentle but firm. You need to prepare yourself for the possibility that this is worse than you think. She was right. I just didn't know how much worse it was going to get. I didn't sleep that night. I kept thinking about those papers my father mentioned. Had I signed something while I was on pain medication? The days after my surgery were a blur. I remembered my parents visiting, remembered thinking how nice it was that they seemed to care. But I couldn't remember signing anything. At 8 in the morning, I called Helen Rutherford's office. Her assistant said she had a 9:30 opening if I could come in right away. I threw on jeans and a sweater and drove downtown to her law office in a historic building near Capitol Square. Helen was in her early 60s, with silver hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She'd handled my house purchase 5 years ago and had just managed the sale. She listened to my story without interrupting, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair. Bernardine, I ran a complete title search before we closed the sale on Friday. Your name was the only name on that deed. If your parents had been legally added as co-owners, it would have shown up. So the papers they're talking about either were never filed, were filed incorrectly, or don't exist in any legal capacity. She tapped her pen against her notepad. But there's something else you need to know. Something I discovered Friday afternoon, after the closing. My stomach dropped. What? I got a call from a loan officer at First National Bank. She was following up on a home equity line of credit that was taken out on your property 6 months ago. The room tilted. That's impossible. That's what I told her. I have all your financial documents. You never took out a home equity line. But she insisted the paperwork was in order. She emailed me copies. Helen turned her computer monitor so I could see it. Someone took out a $20,000 line of credit against your house. I stared at the documents on the screen. There was my address. And there, on the signature line, was something that looked almost like my signature, but not quite. The loops were wrong. The slant was off. That's not my signature, I whispered. I know. I compared it to your signature on the sale documents. It's close, but it's not yours. Helen's expression was grim. Bernardine, I think your parents forged your signature and fraudulently obtained a loan using your property as collateral. Can they do that? I mean, obviously they did it, but how? They would have needed documentation showing they had an ownership interest in the property. Those papers your father mentioned? My guess is they created fake documents, possibly got them notarized by someone who didn't properly verify identity, and used them to convince the bank they had the right to take out this loan. How much of the $20,000 is left? Helen made a phone call. When she hung up, her face told me the answer before her words did. The entire line of credit has been drawn. The balance is $20,000, and it's currently in good standing. Someone's been making the monthly payments. Who? According to the bank, automatic payments are being withdrawn from an account in your father's name. So they were making the payments. That was something, at least. But it didn't change the fact that they'd stolen my identity and put my financial security at risk. What happens to this loan now that the house is sold? I asked. That's the good news. Because the loan was fraudulently obtained, it's void. The bank is liable for not properly verifying the documents. You're not responsible for it. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt sick. My parents had committed fraud against me, their own daughter. There's more, Helen said quietly. I did some digging this morning before you arrived. This wasn't their first time. 15 years ago, your mother's sister filed a police report for identity theft and fraud. The case was dropped when she moved out of state and declined to press charges. Aunt Rachel. I barely knew her. I'd been told she was unstable, that she'd had some kind of breakdown, and moved to Oregon. But what if that wasn't the truth? What if she'd been another victim? My phone buzzed. A text from Carly. Nice job, Bernie. Mom and Dad are devastated. But I guess you got what you wanted. Hope it was worth it. Then another one. Seconds later. Actually, I'm coming to see you. We need to talk. I'm outside your work right now. My shift didn't start until noon, but Carly didn't know that. I texted back. I'm not at work. Don't bother waiting. Her response was immediate. Then I'll wait at your house. The house I sold? Good luck with that. Your condo, then. Mom told me where it is. Of course she did. I'd mentioned I was looking at condos, and my mother had somehow gotten the address. Probably went through my mail when I wasn't looking. Helen was watching me. Everything okay? My sister is trying to ambush me. She doesn't know when to quit. None of them do. That's how people like this operate. Helen closed her laptop. Bernardine, I need to ask you something. Do you want to press charges? Did I? They were my parents. Pressing charges meant police, possibly jail time, definitely a scandal. It meant burning bridges that couldn't be rebuilt. But what they'd done was criminal. And if Helen was right about Aunt Rachel, I wasn't their first victim. I need to think about it. That's fair. But while you're thinking, I'm going to send a cease and desist letter to your parents. They need to stop contacting you, stop entering any property you own or rent, and stop making claims about ownership of your house. Thank you. I left Helen's office and sat in my car in the parking garage. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Texts from Carly, from my mother, even from my father. They were ramping up the pressure, trying to break me down the way they always had. Then my father called again. This time, I let it go to voicemail. But curiosity got the better of me, and I listened to the message. Bernardine, this is your last chance. Come to the house by noon, or we're calling the buyers and telling them there's a legal dispute over the property. We'll tie this up in court for years, if we have to. Your choice. Do the right thing, and let Carly move in, or lose everything you worked for. The clock is ticking. It was blackmail. Pure and simple. I called Helen back immediately. They're threatening to sabotage the sale. Let them try. I'll have my paralegal draft another letter, this time threatening a lawsuit for tortious interference if they contact the buyers. They won't risk it. But would they? I wasn't sure anymore what my parents were capable of. I drove to my condo, a modest 2-bedroom unit in a newer building about 15 minutes from the hospital. I'd signed the lease 2 weeks ago, planning to move in gradually over the next month. Now I was glad I had somewhere to go that they didn't have a key to. Sure enough, when I pulled into the parking lot, Carly's car was there. She was sitting on the steps leading to the main entrance, her phone in her hand. I almost drove away. But I was tired of running, tired of being scared, tired of letting them control my life. I parked and walked toward her. She looked up, and for a second, I saw something in her face that surprised me. She looked scared. "We need to talk," she said. "I don't think we do. Bernie, please. Just 5 minutes." Against my better judgment, I nodded. We walked to a small park across the street and sat on a bench facing a duck pond. "I'm screwed," Carly said without preamble. "I quit my job. I broke my lease. I have nowhere to go." "That's not my problem, Carly. Those were your choices. But they promised me." Her voice cracked. "Mom and Dad promised. They said it was all arranged. They said you'd agreed. They lied to you. And you believed them without ever asking me directly." I know, okay?" I screwed up. She wiped her eyes, smearing her mascara. "But what am I supposed to do now? Get a new job. Find a new apartment. Figure it out like the rest of us have to. I can't go back to Mom and Dad. They won't let me stay with them." I turned to look at her. "What?" "They said I'm 30 years old. I need to figure it out." Those were their exact words. The same parents who had orchestrated this entire plan, who had promised Carly my house, were now refusing to help her when their scheme fell apart. They'd used her as a pawn, and then abandoned her when she was no longer useful. "They did the same thing to me," Carly said quietly. "When I was younger, I just didn't see it." "What do you mean?" She took a shaky breath. "I got accepted to Ohio State when I was 18. Full acceptance to their business program. I was so excited. But then Mom and Dad sat me down and said there was a problem with the college fund they'd been promising me since I was little." "What kind of problem?" "They spent it. All of it. Dad bought a boat the summer before my senior year. Remember that? The one they kept for 2 years and then sold at a loss?" I did remember. They'd been so proud of that boat, even though they hardly ever used it. They told me I could go to community college and figure it out from there, or I could get a job and save up. So that's what I did. I've been working retail and food service ever since. Always told that Bernie was the smart one, Bernie was the lucky one, Bernie got Grandma's money. For the first time, I saw Carly clearly. Not as my spoiled little sister, but as another victim of our parents' manipulation. They'd set us against each other, made us compete for scraps while they took everything of value. "I'm sorry that happened to you," I said, and I meant it. "I'm sorry I believed them about your house. I should have talked to you first. I should have known better." She looked at me, mascara streaks on her cheeks, and for once, she looked genuinely remorseful. "Can you help me?" "Not with a place to stay. I know that's off the table. But maybe just advice on how to start over?" Before I could answer, my phone rang. Helen's number. "I need to take this," I told Carly. "Bernardine," Helen said, her voice tense. "We have a situation. The buyers just called me. Your mother showed up at the house." "What?" She let herself in with a key and was removing items from the house. The buyers arrived to do a walkthrough, and she was in the process of taking what she claims are family heirlooms. "Call the police," I said immediately. "Already done, but there's something else." The buyers found evidence that she's been entering the house regularly. She'd been hiding items in the attic, apparently planning to retrieve them later. "And Bernardine?" "She took jewelry. The pieces your grandmother left you. They were in your dresser. My grandmother's pearls, her opal ring, the antique brooch she'd worn on her wedding day. I'd kept them in my bedroom in a locked jewelry box. My mother had broken into my house and stolen from me. The police are meeting the buyers at the house now," Helen continued. "They want you to come identify what's been taken. Can you do that?" "I'll be there in 20 minutes. I hung up and turned to Carly. She'd heard enough to understand what was happening. "Mom's been stealing from you?" she asked, her voice small. Apparently. For months. Carly stood up. I'll come with you. Why? Because I need to see it. I need to see who they really are. We drove separately to my old house, the one I'd sold just days ago. There were 2 police cars in the driveway, and my mother was sitting on the front steps, crying dramatically while a female officer took notes. When she saw me, she stood up. Bernardine! Tell them this is all a misunderstanding. These items belong to the family. I walked past her without a word and went inside, where the buyers, a professional-looking couple in their late 40s, were standing in the living room with another officer. Miss Callahan? The officer asked. I'm Officer Jennifer Martinez. Can you confirm what's been taken? I went upstairs to my former bedroom. My jewelry box sat open on the dresser. Empty. In the attic, there were boxes I didn't recognize, filled with items from around my house. Kitchen gadgets I'd bought, books from my shelves, even the good towels I'd splurged on last year. She was planning a systematic theft, one of the buyers said quietly. He'd followed me upstairs. I'm Thomas Whitmore, by the way. This is my wife, Grace. I'm so sorry about all this, I said. Don't be. We're not backing out of the sale, but we are very concerned about your safety. He handed me a business card. I'm a criminal defense attorney. My wife is a financial fraud investigator, and what your family has done to you is extensive and criminal. Grace, his wife, stepped forward. We'd like to help you, if you'll let us. Pro bono. What they've done to you shouldn't go unpunished. I looked at these strangers, these people who were buying my house, and saw more kindness in their eyes than I'd seen from my own family in years. Thank you, I whispered. I think I need all the help I can get. Monday morning, I sat in Thomas Whitmore's downtown law office. The building was all glass and steel, and his corner office had a view of the Scioto River. Grace was there too, her laptop open and filled with spreadsheets and documents. Let's start with what we know, Thomas said, his legal pad covered in notes. Your parents forged your signature to obtain a $20,000 home equity line of credit. They had unauthorized keys made to your property. Your mother was caught stealing from your house. And based on what you've told us, there's a pattern of financial exploitation going back years. Helen Rutherford already filed a police report, I said, for the fraud and the theft. Good. That's step 1. Step 2 is documenting everything. Grace turned her laptop so I could see it. I spent yesterday afternoon pulling records. That loan your parents took out? The notary who supposedly verified your signature works at a UPS store where your father is a regular customer. I'm guessing your dad asked him for a favor. Can we prove that? I'm working on it. But here's what's interesting. The loan was taken out 6 months ago. According to the bank records, the money was withdrawn in 3 installments. The first withdrawal, $15,000, happened the same week your sister paid off her credit card debt and her car loan. I felt sick. So they stole from me to pay off Carly's debts? It appears so. The second withdrawal was $5,000, taken out 3 months ago. That corresponds with a family vacation your parents took to Florida. The one I wasn't invited to, I said quietly. Exactly. And the third withdrawal was just last month. $1,000. I'm still tracking where that went. Thomas leaned forward. Bernardine, what your parents did constitutes multiple felonies. Identity theft, forgery, fraud. Your mother's theft from your house adds burglary. We're talking serious prison time if the DA decides to prosecute. But? I could hear the but in his voice. But they're your parents. I understand this is complicated. However, I need you to understand something. If they've done this to you, they've likely done it to others. Maybe they're doing it to others right now. I thought of Aunt Rachel. I thought of Carly, manipulated and then abandoned. What do you recommend? I asked. Press charges, full stop. But also, let Grace investigate. She's one of the best financial fraud investigators in the state. If there's more to find, she'll find it. Grace smiled at me. I've already started. And Bernadine? There's definitely more. My phone buzzed. Another text from my mother. How could you do this to me? The police came to our house. Our neighbors saw everything. You've humiliated us. Then my father. This vendetta of yours needs to stop. You're tearing this family apart. And Carly. I'm at the women's shelter on Broad Street, in case you were wondering. That last one hit me hard. Whatever else Carly had done, she was homeless now. And while part of me thought she'd made her own choices, another part of me remembered her story about the college fund, about how our parents had set her up to fail just like they'd tried to do to me. Can I make a call? I asked Thomas. Of course. Use the conference room if you need privacy. I went into the glass-walled conference room and dialed Carly's number. She answered on the first ring. Bernie, how are you doing? I'm okay. The shelter's actually nice. They're helping me apply for jobs. There's a woman here who's going to help me with my resume. She paused. I saw Mom and Dad yesterday, after what happened at your house. And? They were mad at me. Can you believe that? They said I should have moved in before you could sell the house. Like I could have just broken in and squatted or something. Her voice was bitter. They're not who I thought they were. No, they're not. Bernie, I need to tell you something. Last week, before everything blew up, Mom took me to her bank. She had me sign some papers. She said it was for her estate planning, that she was leaving me something in her will. My blood ran cold. Carly, what did you sign? I don't know. I didn't read them. She said it was just a formality. Are you listed on any of her accounts now? Do you have access to her bank information? She gave me a debit card. Said it was for emergencies. Carly, they're setting you up. If they're running scams, they're trying to make it look like you're involved. You could be held liable for whatever they're doing. There was a long silence. Then, what do I do? First, do not use that debit card. Second, come to this address. I gave her Thomas's office information. We have lawyers and investigators who can help you figure out what you signed and how to protect yourself. They're my parents, she said, her voice breaking. How did it come to this? I don't know. But Carly, it's going to be okay. We're going to get through this. I hung up and went back to Thomas's office. We have another victim, my sister. They had her sign documents last week, and she has access to one of their bank accounts. Grace looked up from her laptop, her expression grim. That's a classic pattern. They're trying to distribute liability. If authorities come after them, they'll claim Carly had access to the accounts and must have been the one committing fraud. Can we stop it? If we move fast, yes. Is your sister willing to cooperate? She's coming here this afternoon. Good. In the meantime, I have something to show you. Grace pulled up a document on her screen. I've been digging into your parents' financial history. 3 years ago, they filed for bankruptcy. Did you know about that? No. They never mentioned it. It was a Chapter 7. They discharged about $80,000 in credit card debt. But here's what's interesting. Right before they filed, they took out a significant loan from your grandmother, Dorothy. How much? $50,000. Your grandmother died 6 months later. The loan was never repaid, but because it was a personal family loan with no formal paperwork, it wasn't included in the bankruptcy. So they borrowed money from Grandma Dorothy, never paid it back, then went bankrupt on their other debts? Exactly. And here's the kicker. Your grandmother's will left most of her estate to you, right? That $30,000 you used for your house down payment? Yes. Well, your parents contested the will. They claimed your grandmother wasn't of sound mind when she wrote it. The contest was dismissed, but not before they racked up about $20,000 in legal fees fighting it. I felt like I'd been punched. They tried to take my inheritance? They did. And when that didn't work, they started systematically stealing from you in other ways. Thomas stood up and walked to the window. Bernardine, I've been a lawyer for 25 years. I've seen a lot of family dysfunction. But this level of calculated exploitation is rare. Your parents are grifters. They use family connections to access money and resources, and when they're caught or cut off, they move on to the next target. Aunt Rachel, I said. Tell me about her. I told him what I knew, which wasn't much. Grace made notes, then started typing rapidly. Rachel Patterson, currently living in Portland, Oregon. Owns a small business, a bakery. No criminal record. Clean credit. Grace looked up. Want me to reach out? Would she talk to us? Only one way to find out. Grace made the call, putting it on speaker. A woman's voice answered, warm and slightly suspicious. This is Rachel. Miss Patterson, my name is Grace Whitmore. I'm a financial investigator, and I'm calling on behalf of your niece, Bernardine Callahan. There was a long pause. Bernie? Is she okay? She's fine. She's actually here with me. May I put you on speaker? Please do. Grace pushed a button, and Rachel's voice filled the room. Bernie? It's been so long. What's going on? I took a deep breath. Aunt Rachel, I need to know what happened between you and my parents. The real story. Another long pause. Then, your mother forged my name on a loan application when I was 28. She cleaned out our joint checking account. When I confronted her, she told the whole family I was having a mental breakdown and making up stories. No one believed me, so I moved away and never looked back. Why didn't you press charges? I was young and scared. And honestly, I just wanted to get away from them. I started over in Oregon, built a good life. I thought about reaching out to you over the years, especially when I heard you'd become a nurse. But I was afraid your parents would have poisoned you against me. They told me you were unstable. Of course they did. It's what they do. They exploit people and then paint themselves as the victims when they're caught. Rachel's voice softened. Bernie, why are you asking me this now? Because they did the same thing to me. Worse, actually. I told her everything. When I finished, Rachel was quiet for a long moment. I'm so sorry, honey. I should have fought harder. I should have warned you. It's not your fault. But Rachel, I'm not running away. I'm fighting back. And I'm pressing charges. Good. It's about damn time someone held them accountable. Rachel paused. Do you need help? I have some money saved. I could hire a lawyer or... We have lawyers. Great ones, actually. But thank you. Then let me do something else. Let me fly out there and support you. You shouldn't have to face this alone. Something in my chest loosened. Family. Real family. Not the obligation and guilt kind my parents had weaponized, but the genuine support kind that showed up when you needed it. I'd really like that, I said. After we hung up, Thomas smiled at me. You're building a good team, Bernardine. I'm starting to realize I've had one all along. I just couldn't see it because my parents kept me isolated. Grace closed her laptop. Okay, here's where we are. We have documented fraud. We have your testimony, your sister's cooperation, and your aunt's corroborating testimony about a pattern of behavior. We have bank records and forged documents. This is a solid case. What happens next? We go to the DA's office tomorrow. We present everything we have, and we let the justice system do its job. Thomas handed me another business card. In the meantime, I want you to document every contact your parents make with you. Every call, every text, every time they show up somewhere. We're going to get you a restraining order. Will that really stop them? It will make it illegal for them to contact you. And if they violate it, they'll be arrested. After what happened at your old house, I think a judge will grant it without issue. I left Thomas's office feeling lighter than I had in days. For the first time since that disastrous Sunday dinner, I felt like I wasn't just reacting to my parents' manipulation. I was actively fighting back. My phone buzzed as I walked to my car. Morgan, coffee? I want to hear everything. Meet me at the hospital cafeteria. I start my shift in an hour. See you in 15. As I drove through downtown Columbus, past the State House and the university campus, I thought about how much my life had changed in just a few days. I'd sold my house. I'd discovered my parents were criminals. I'd reconnected with an aunt I barely knew, and I'd found allies in the most unexpected places. My parents had always told me that family was everything, that blood was thicker than water, but they'd conveniently left out the rest of that saying. The blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb. The family you choose, the bonds you forge through shared values and mutual respect, those matter more than biology. I was finally learning that lesson, and I was ready to build the family I deserved. Carly showed up at Thomas's office Tuesday afternoon, looking exhausted but determined. She had a folder full of documents, and when Grace started going through them, her expression grew increasingly concerned. "These are power of attorney documents," Grace said, holding up one of the papers. "Carly, you gave your parents complete control over your financial decisions." "What?" Carly grabbed the paper and scanned it. "Mom said it was for her will. She said she was leaving me her china and wanted to make sure I could claim it. This has nothing to do with a will. With these documents, your parents can open accounts in your name, take out loans, make financial decisions on your behalf." Grace pulled out another paper. "And this one? This is an authorized user agreement for a credit card. Carly, do you have any credit cards?" "Just one. The one I maxed out that they paid off." "Well, you have 3 now. Your parents opened 2 more in your name. One has a balance of $8,000, and the other has a balance of $12,000. Both are current on payments, so it hasn't affected your credit yet, but—" Carly's face went white. $20,000? I didn't authorize that. "They don't need your authorization. You gave them power of attorney." Grace's voice was gentle but firm. "Carly, they're using you as a front for their spending. If they default on these cards or run up more debt, you're liable. And if authorities investigate them, you'll look complicit. How do I fix it?" "We revoke the power of attorney immediately. We file a fraud report with the credit card companies, and you cooperate fully with the investigation into your parents." Carly started crying, not the dramatic tears she'd used at Sunday dinner, but real, heartbroken sobs. "They're my parents. How could they do this?" I sat down next to her and put my arm around her shoulders. A week ago, I would have said Carly deserved whatever she got for being so entitled and thoughtless. But now, I understood. She'd been groomed her entire life to trust them blindly, to accept their authority without question, to believe that family loyalty meant never saying no. "They're sick people," I said quietly. "They use people. That's what they do. Did they ever love us? Or were we always just resources to them?" It was the question I'd been avoiding asking myself. I didn't have a good answer. Over the next few days, Grace's investigation uncovered even more. My parents had taken out a car loan in my name 3 years ago, forging my signature on the application. The car was sold 2 years later, and they'd pocketed the money, but continued making the payments so it wouldn't affect my credit. They'd opened a credit card in Carly's name when she was 19, using her student ID and social security number they had access to as her parents. They'd been systematically exploiting both of us for years, carefully covering their tracks so we wouldn't notice. But the most devastating discovery came on Thursday. Grace found evidence that they'd been doing this to other people too. A neighbor, an elderly man named Harold, who died 2 years ago. My father had been helping him with his finances in his final years. After Harold died, it became clear that over $50,000 was missing from his accounts. The family suspected my father but couldn't prove it, and they didn't pursue it because they didn't want the stress of a legal battle. "This is who they are," Thomas said when he showed me the evidence. "They're predators. They target vulnerable people, gain their trust, and then rob them blind." Rachel flew in on Friday. She was tall and lean, with gray-streaked brown hair and my grandmother's smile. We met at my condo, and the moment I opened the door, she pulled me into a hug. "I'm sorry I stayed away so long," she said. I should have been here for you. You're here now. That's what matters. We sat on my small balcony drinking iced tea and watching the sunset over the city. Rachel told me about her life in Oregon, her bakery, her friends. She'd never married, never had kids. She'd poured all her energy into building a life she could be proud of, one that wasn't tainted by my parents' toxicity. Do you have regrets? I asked. About leaving? No. About not staying in touch with you? Every day. She reached over and squeezed my hand. But I was so afraid they'd use me to hurt you. I thought staying away was the kindest thing I could do. They told me you abandoned the family, that you were selfish and unstable. Of course they did. And I bet they told everyone the same thing about you now, right? I showed her the messages I'd been getting from extended family. Most of them were variations on the same theme. How could I do this to my parents? Didn't I understand what family meant? I was selfish, cruel, heartless. They're running the same playbook, Rachel said. Isolate the victim, control the narrative, make everyone else see you as the problem. Some of them are starting to see through it. After Mom got caught stealing from my house, a few cousins reached out to apologize. The truth always comes out eventually. It just takes time. On Monday morning, exactly 1 week after the dinner that changed everything, we went to the DA's office. Thomas and Grace had compiled a comprehensive report. The forged loan documents, the credit cards opened in mine and Carly's names, the unauthorized access to my house, the theft, the suspicious circumstances around Harold's missing money. The assistant district attorney, a sharp-eyed woman named Jessica Torres, reviewed everything carefully. When she looked up, her expression was serious. This is one of the most comprehensive cases of familial financial abuse I've seen, and the evidence is solid. I'm going to take this to the grand jury. What does that mean? I asked. It means we're moving forward with criminal charges. Your parents will be arrested and arraigned. They'll have the opportunity to post bail, and then we'll proceed to trial, unless they take a plea deal. How long does that take? Depends on a lot of factors. But with evidence this strong, I'm guessing their attorney will advise them to take a deal. I felt simultaneously relieved and devastated. This was really happening. My parents were going to be arrested. There would be news coverage. Everyone would know. As if reading my mind, Jessica said, I want you to prepare yourself. This is going to be public. The media will likely cover it, especially given the unusual nature of the crimes. You'll be asked for comments. My advice? Don't give any. Let the legal system work. That afternoon, my parents were arrested at their home. The local news ran a story. Couple accused of defrauding their own daughters. My phone exploded with calls and texts, but I ignored all of them except the ones from Morgan, Rachel, and Thomas. The arraignment was the next day. I didn't go, but Thomas attended and called me afterward. They pled not guilty. Their attorney is a guy named Robert Mitchell, and he's already spinning a story about how this is all a misunderstanding. What kind of misunderstanding? He's claiming they had verbal permission from you for everything, that you knew about the loans and the credit cards, and you're only claiming fraud now because you're angry about some family dispute. I felt sick. That's a lie. I know, and the evidence will prove it. But be prepared. They're going to try to drag you through the mud to save themselves. They did exactly that. Over the next week, I started getting messages from people I hadn't spoken to in years. Old neighbors, distant relatives, even some of my parents' friends. They'd all heard the same story. I was vindictive, mentally unstable, trying to destroy my parents because they'd sided with Carly in some petty argument. But then something unexpected happened. Aunt Rachel started calling those same people. She told them her story, what my parents had done to her 20 years ago. And slowly, the narrative began to shift. Morgan was a rock during this time. She covered shifts for me when I couldn't face going to work. She brought me food when I forgot to eat. She sat with me while I cried and raged and processed the betrayal. You're doing the right thing, she said one night as we sat on my couch. eating takeout Chinese food. I know it doesn't feel like it right now, but you are. How do you know? Because you're breaking a cycle. Your parents have been doing this for decades. To Rachel, to you, to Carly, to that poor man Harold. If you don't stop them, they'll keep doing it. Maybe to your cousin's kids next. Maybe to their grandkids someday. She was right. This was bigger than just me. 3 weeks after the arrest, their attorney reached out to Thomas. They wanted to discuss a plea deal. Thomas called me immediately. They're offering to plead guilty to reduced charges in exchange for probation, restitution, and counseling. No jail time. That's it? They steal from their own children and an elderly man, and they get probation? I know it doesn't feel like justice, but it's a guaranteed conviction. If we go to trial, there's always a chance they could be acquitted. This way, they have a record. They'll have to pay back everything they took, and they'll be on probation for 5 years. One violation, and they go to jail. Do I have a say in this? As the victim, you can submit a statement to the court. You can tell the judge how this has affected you. I spent 2 days writing that statement. I poured everything into it. The betrayal, the violation, the years of manipulation I hadn't even recognized until now. I talked about Carly, about Rachel, about Harold. I talked about how trust, once broken, was almost impossible to rebuild. The plea hearing was on a Thursday morning in early September. I sat in the courtroom, flanked by Rachel on one side and Morgan on the other. Carly sat behind us, her hands folded in her lap. Thomas and Grace were there too, and even Helen Rutherford had come to show support. My parents sat at the defense table, looking smaller somehow. My mother's hair was gray at the roots, and she'd clearly been crying. My father stared straight ahead, his jaw tight. The judge, a woman in her 50s with steel-gray hair, reviewed the plea agreement. Then she asked if I wanted to read my victim impact statement. I stood up, my legs shaking, and read what I'd written. When I finished, the courtroom was silent. The judge looked at my parents. "Do you have anything to say?" My father stood. "Your Honor, we never meant to hurt anyone. We were trying to help our family and things got out of hand. We're sorry for any pain we've caused." It was a non-apology. I hadn't expected anything different. The judge accepted the plea deal but added her own conditions. In addition to the terms outlined by the prosecution, I'm imposing a no-contact order. You are not to contact Bernardine Callahan or Carly Patterson for a minimum of 2 years. You will attend financial counseling and addiction counseling, and you will perform 500 hours of community service. Do you understand these terms? Yes, Your Honor, they said in unison. Then, by the power vested in me, by the state of Ohio, I accept your guilty plea. You're remanded to the probation department for processing. And just like that, it was over. We walked out of the courthouse into brilliant September sunshine. Rachel put her arm around my shoulders. "How do you feel?" she asked. "I'm not sure yet. Relieved, I think. But also sad. That's normal. You're grieving the parents you thought you had. Will it get easier? Eventually. It takes time." Carly caught up with us on the courthouse steps. She'd been working at a pharmacy for the past month and was taking online classes in medical billing. She'd moved into a small apartment, nothing fancy, but it was hers. "Bernie, can I talk to you for a minute?" Rachel and Morgan walked ahead, giving us space. "I just wanted to thank you," Carly said, "for helping me see what they really were, and for helping me get out from under all that debt they'd put in my name. You're doing the work, Carly. I just pointed you in the right direction. I know I don't deserve a relationship with you after everything I did, but maybe someday, if I keep proving myself, we could be sisters again. Real sisters." I looked at her, seeing both the entitled woman who'd assumed she could take my house and the scared young woman who'd been manipulated her whole life. "We'll see," I said. "Trust takes time to rebuild." "I understand. I'll keep working on it." As she walked away, Morgan came back to my side. "You okay?" "Yeah. I think I actually am. That night, Rachel, Morgan, and I went to a nice restaurant downtown to celebrate. As we toasted with champagne, I realized something. For the first time in my adult life, I felt free. Free from obligation. Free from guilt. Free from the weight of always trying to fix everyone else's problems. I'd sold my house, pressed charges against my parents, and rebuilt my life on my own terms. And somehow, I'd come out the other side stronger. The months following the plea deal were a strange mix of healing and adjustment. My parents were ordered to pay back everything they'd stolen, $20,000 to me, $20,000 to Carly, and $50,000 to Harold's estate. They had to sell their house to cover it. They moved into a small rental apartment on the outskirts of Columbus. My father had to retire early, and my mother got a job at a grocery store. For the first time in their lives, they were facing real consequences for their actions. I didn't feel the satisfaction I'd expected. Mostly I just felt tired and sad. These were the people who were supposed to love and protect me, and instead, they'd exploited me. That realization hurt more than any financial loss. But life moved forward. I threw myself into my work at the hospital, picking up extra shifts. I loved being a pediatric nurse, loved the feeling of making a real difference in kids' lives. And my new condo, small as it was, felt like a sanctuary. Rachel stayed with me for 3 weeks before flying back to Oregon, and in that time, we built a real relationship. We talked every Sunday, and she'd already invited me to Portland for Thanksgiving. The extended family slowly came around. Aunt Diane called in October to apologize. Your mother called me crying, and I just believed her version of events. I should have listened to you. Uncle Carl sent a handwritten letter. I always thought there was something off about Patricia's stories. I'm sorry I didn't trust my instincts. Even some of my parents' friends reached out. One of them, a woman named Susan who'd known my mother for 30 years, said, I'm not surprised, to be honest. Patricia always had expensive tastes, but never wanted to work for anything. I should have seen this coming. The most unexpected apology came from my grandmother Dorothy. She called me one afternoon in late October, her voice fragile over the phone. Bernadine, I need to tell you something. Something I should have told you years ago. What is it, Grandma? When I wrote my will, I left most of my money to you because I knew what your mother was. I'd seen her manipulate people my whole life. She tried it with me too, more times than I can count. Why didn't you say something? Because she's my daughter. And I kept hoping she'd change, that she'd grow up and become a better person. But she never did. And I'm sorry I didn't warn you sooner. I thought giving you money would protect you, but I should have given you the truth instead. Grandma, you gave me both. You gave me the means to build a life, and now I have the truth too. I'm okay. Are you really? I thought about it. Was I okay? I'd been betrayed by my own parents, discovered years of exploitation, and watched my family implode. But I'd also found real friends, reconnected with Rachel, and learned to set boundaries. I'd stood up for myself in a way I never had before. Yeah, I said. I really am. Carly's transformation was gradual but genuine. She showed up to her shifts at the pharmacy on time. She completed her medical billing certification. She found a therapist who specialized in family trauma. And slowly, month by month, she started to understand how our parents had shaped her into someone she didn't want to be. In November, she texted me, I got a job offer. Full-time medical billing position at Riverside Hospital. It's not glamorous, but it's stable. And it's mine. I called her immediately. Carly, that's amazing! I couldn't have done it without your help. And Grace's, she wrote me a reference letter. Did you know that? I didn't, but it didn't surprise me. Grace and Thomas had become unexpected friends. They'd invited me to dinner several times, and their genuine kindness never ceased to amaze me. How are you feeling about everything? I asked Carly. Honestly, I'm angry. At them, at myself, at the whole situation. But I'm also grateful. If you hadn't sold the house, if you hadn't fought back, I'd still be stuck in that cycle. I'd still be waiting for them to solve my problems. You're solving them yourself now. I'm trying, Bernie. I know you said trust takes time, but I was wondering if you'd want to have coffee sometime. No pressure. Just sisters, trying to figure out this mess together. We met at a cafe near the hospital the following Saturday. It was awkward at first, both of us unsure what to say. But eventually, we started talking. Really talking. About our childhoods. About how different our experiences had been. About how we'd both been hurt in different ways by the same people. Do you think they ever loved us? Carly asked, echoing her question from months ago. I think they loved what we could do for them, I said. But real love, the kind that's unconditional and selfless, I don't think they're capable of it. That's sad. It is. But Carly, we can break that pattern. We can learn to be better. Do you think we'll ever have a real relationship? Like normal sisters? I don't know, but I think we can try. It wasn't forgiveness exactly. It was more like cautious hope. Carly had hurt me, but she'd also been victimized by the same people. And while I couldn't forget what she'd done, I could acknowledge that she was working to change. The first Thanksgiving without my parents was strange. I flew to Portland to spend it with Rachel at her bakery. She'd invited a group of friends, people she'd built her chosen family with over the years. They were warm and welcoming, and as I sat around Rachel's table, eating amazing food and laughing at stories, I realized something. This was what family was supposed to feel like. Safe, joyful, mutual. Rachel's friends asked about my parents, but not in a nosy way. They genuinely wanted to understand what I'd been through. My mother did something similar, one woman said. Not fraud, but emotional manipulation, making me feel guilty for having boundaries. It took me years to break free. The hardest part is realizing they're not going to change, another woman added. You keep hoping for that moment when they'll apologize, when they'll finally see you as a person instead of a resource. But it never comes. These women got it. They'd lived it. And their validation meant more to me than I could express. On Christmas Eve, I hosted my own celebration at my condo. It was small, just Morgan, Rachel, Thomas, and Grace, and Thomas's mother Margaret. And, after much consideration, Carly. Carly brought a homemade pie and a small wrapped gift. I know we're not doing big presents, but I wanted you to have this. Inside was a framed photograph I'd never seen before. It was of me and our grandmother Dorothy, taken when I was about 10 years old. We were in her garden, both of us laughing. Where did you find this? I asked, my throat tight. It was in a box of Grandma's things. Mom was going to throw it away, but I kept it. I thought you should have it. Thank you, I whispered. As we ate dinner that night, sharing stories and laughter, I looked around at the people gathered in my small living room. This was my family. Not the one I was born into, but the one I'd chosen. The one I'd built from love and trust and mutual respect. Margaret, Thomas's mother, raised her glass. I'd like to make a toast to Bernardine, who taught us all what courage looks like, and to new beginnings. We clinked glasses, and I felt something settle in my chest. Peace. Not the absence of pain, but the presence of hope. The new year brought more changes. My parents completed their probation requirements without incident. I heard through the family grapevine that they were going to therapy, though I didn't know if they were actually engaging with it or just checking boxes. I didn't reach out to them, and they didn't violate the no-contact order. Occasionally, I'd see my mother at the grocery store where she worked. We'd make eye contact across the produce section, and then we'd both turn away. There was nothing to say. In February, Grace called me with news. Harold's family wants to meet you. They want to thank you for what you did. Harold's daughter Patricia, which I found grimly ironic given my mother's name, invited me to lunch. She was in her 60s, a kind-faced woman with Harold's blue eyes. My father talked about your dad all the time in his last years, she said. He trusted him completely. When we realized the money was missing, it nearly destroyed us. Not because of the money itself, but because it meant Dad's last years were spent with someone who was robbing him. I'm so sorry. Don't be. You're the one who finally stopped them. Because of you, they had to pay restitution. We got most of the money back. But more than that, we got validation. For years, we wondered if we were wrong, if maybe Dad had spent that money himself and just forgot. Now we know the truth. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. You did a brave thing. It couldn't have been easy, turning in your own parents. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. But you did it anyway. That's what makes you a hero. I didn't feel like a hero. I felt like a survivor. But maybe that was enough. 6 months had passed since that fateful Sunday dinner when I'd announced I'd sold my house. It was now spring, and Columbus was in full bloom. The dogwood trees on my street were covered in white and pink blossoms, and the air smelled like fresh grass and possibility. I'd been at County General for 7 years now, and last month I'd been promoted to charge nurse in the pediatric unit. It was a role I'd worked toward for years, and the recognition felt good. Not because of the title or the modest pay increase, but because it meant I was valued for my skills and dedication. My condo had become a real home. Rachel had helped me decorate it over Christmas, and now it reflected my personality. Warm colors, comfortable furniture, plants on every available surface. My balcony garden was thriving with tomatoes and herbs ready for summer. Therapy had helped. I'd been seeing Dr. Sandra Williams, a psychologist who specialized in family trauma, since September. She'd helped me understand that what I'd experienced wasn't just bad parenting. It was abuse. Financial abuse, emotional manipulation, systematic exploitation. You spent your whole life being trained to ignore your own needs, Dr. Williams had said in one of our early sessions. Your value was determined by what you could provide to others. Learning to prioritize yourself isn't selfish, it's survival. She was right. And slowly, I was learning. I'd started saying no to things I didn't want to do. I'd stopped over-explaining my decisions. I'd learned that no was a complete sentence, and I didn't owe anyone a justification for my boundaries. My relationship with Carly was improving. We met for coffee twice a month now, and while we weren't as close as some sisters, we were building something real. She'd been sober for 8 months, was excelling at her job, and had even started dating someone. A nice guy named Brian who worked in IT and treated her with respect. I never knew relationships could be this easy, she'd told me last week. No drama, no manipulation, just 2 people being honest with each other. That's what healthy looks like, I'd said. Rachel and I talked every week. She'd become the mother figure I'd always needed, offering advice without judgment, support without strings attached. I'd visited her in Portland twice, and she'd come to Ohio 3 times. We were planning a trip to the Grand Canyon together in July. Thomas and Grace had become true friends. We had dinner once a month, and Margaret, Thomas's mother who lived in my former house, always sent me photos of her garden. She'd expanded my herb garden into something spectacular, and I loved seeing the space I'd built being used and loved. Even Morgan, who'd always been my best friend, seemed closer now. She'd been with me through the darkest parts of this journey, and I knew I could trust her with anything. This year, I hosted Thanksgiving at my condo. It was a full house. Rachel, Morgan, Carly and Brian, Thomas and Grace and Margaret, Aunt Diane and her husband, even Harold's daughter Patricia and her family. As I looked around my living room at this collection of people, some related by blood, most connected by choice, I felt overwhelmed with gratitude. This was family. Real family. After dinner, as everyone was having coffee and pie on the balcony, Carly pulled me aside. "I have something to tell you," she said, her eyes bright. "I'm going back to school, for real this time. I got accepted to Ohio State's business program. I'm going to finish what I started when I was 18. "Carly, that's incredible." "I'm paying for it myself. Student loans, but manageable ones. And Brian's being really supportive. She smiled, and for the first time, I saw genuine joy in her face. I'm not the person I was a year ago. And I have you to thank for that. You did the work, Carly. You made the changes. But you showed me it was possible. You showed me what it looks like to stand up for yourself and build the life you want. Later that night, after everyone had left and I was cleaning up, I thought about what Carly had said. Had I really done that? Built the life I wanted? I looked around my small condo. It wasn't as big as the house I'd sold. It didn't have a backyard garden. But it was mine, truly mine, in a way that house never had been. Because this space wasn't tainted by my parents' manipulation. This space represented freedom. I made myself a cup of tea and went out onto the balcony. The city lights twinkled below, and somewhere in the distance, I could hear music playing. My phone buzzed with a text from Margaret, a photo of the roses in full bloom at my old house, with the caption, "Thank you for trusting us with your home. It's full of love here." I smiled and texted back, "It looks beautiful. I'm so glad it found the right family." And I meant it. That house had served its purpose. It had been my sanctuary when I needed one, my proof that I could build something solid and real. But it had also become a tool my parents used to control me. Selling it hadn't been about the money or spite. It had been about reclaiming my autonomy. As I sat there in the warm spring evening, I thought about everything I'd learned over the past 6 months, about boundaries and self-worth, about the difference between obligation and love, about how the family you choose can be more powerful than the family you're born into. I'd learned that standing up for yourself doesn't make you selfish. It makes you whole. That saying no to people who exploit you isn't cruel. It's necessary. That sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable someone's dysfunction. I'd learned that healing isn't linear. Some days, I still felt angry at my parents for what they'd done. Other days, I just felt sad for them, trapped in their own patterns of greed and manipulation. But most days now, I just felt grateful. Grateful for the people who'd stood by me. Grateful for the strength I'd found in myself. Grateful for the life I was building. My parents had always told me that family was everything, that blood was thicker than water, but they'd been wrong. Or rather, they'd been telling me an incomplete truth. The full saying is, the blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb. The bonds we choose, the relationships we build through shared values and mutual respect, those matter more than biology. I'd found my covenant, my chosen family. The people who celebrated my successes instead of resenting them, who supported my boundaries instead of pushing against them, who loved me for who I was, not for what I could provide. And Carly was slowly earning her way into that circle, not through grand gestures or desperate apologies, but through consistent, humble actions, through showing up, doing the work, and proving over time that she'd changed. As for my parents, I didn't know if they'd ever truly change. I hoped they would, for their own sakes, but I'd stopped waiting for their transformation. I'd stopped hoping for the apology that would make everything okay, because I'd realized something crucial. I didn't need their validation to heal. I didn't need their acknowledgement to move forward. I could build a beautiful life without them. That realization was freedom. I thought back to that Sunday dinner 6 months ago. The moment when Carly announced she was moving into my house, and I'd calmly said I'd sold it. Everyone had expected me to cave, to apologize, to find a way to fix the situation and make everyone happy. But I hadn't. I'd stood my ground. And in doing so, I'd saved myself. Sometimes, protecting yourself means making moves other people won't understand until it's too late. Sometimes, it means disappointing people who've counted on your compliance. Sometimes, it means being called selfish by people who've been using you. And that's okay, because here's what I know now. You don't owe anyone access to your life, your home, or your peace. Not even family. Especially not family who treats you like an ATM with a heartbeat. Real love doesn't steal. It doesn't manipulate. It doesn't demand. Real love respects boundaries. Real love celebrates your success. Real love wants you to thrive, even if it means they have to step back. And if someone in your life makes you feel guilty for having boundaries, if they promise away your resources without asking, if they call you selfish for protecting yourself, they're not showing love. They're showing control. You deserve better. You deserve people who see your worth, who respect your autonomy, who love you without conditions or expectations. I sold my house last Friday. That's what I'd said that night at dinner. 7 words that changed everything. But what I really sold was my cage. And what I bought was my freedom. As I sat on my balcony that spring evening, surrounded by the life I'd built and the family I'd chosen, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. I felt at home. Not in a house or a condo or any physical space, but in myself. And that was the greatest gift of all. So here's my question for you. Have you ever had to set a boundary with family that felt impossible? Have you ever had to choose your peace over someone else's expectations? I'd love to hear your story in the comments below. Your experience might help someone else who's struggling with the same decision. If this story resonated with you, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. These stories matter because they remind us we're not alone in these struggles. And if you know someone who needs to hear this message, someone who's struggling with family boundaries or manipulation, please share this video with them. Sometimes, hearing someone else's story is the permission we need to stand up for ourselves. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being here, for being part of this community. I hope you find the courage to build the life you deserve, surrounded by people who truly see and value you. May you always choose your peace over obligation. May you always know your worth. And may you always remember, sometimes selling the house means buying back your life. Take care of yourselves. You're worth it.